Thank you for joining our session on customer engagement with contextual communication. So today, we will cover, a bit of a background around contextual communication and as well how you can make use of APIs like we offer at Nexmo, and also show you a quick demo, and then we'll finish off with a panel with some of the leading experts on the field, which actually have experience in the field. So, I mean, one of the challenges we all face here is that actually the needs of the brands, around speed, fending off, disruption, from players, really being really excellent at orchestrating customer experiences, are diverging actually from the needs of consumers who just want really, in effect, convenience, but also, I think, authenticity. We're all bombarded with all those messages. Well, how do you actually maintain authenticity and security and privacy? If you look here, an example, A2P messaging, application-to-person messaging, transactional SMS, very often being bombarded. I mean, it's nice, you get notified, but how do you actually follow up? Similar, you can also use SMS for consumer-to-consumer communication. So you've had this nice conversation, it's enabled by the brand, maybe it's a marketplace, but how do you go about sharing this? And going further. And similarly, still 2017, having to call into a call center, you're going to have to repeat yourself. It's still the same. Things haven't changed, for the last 20 years, pretty much. And on top of this, it's made slightly worse by the fact that consumers every day are being exposed to completely different paradigms of experiences. On the left-hand side here, you've got what I call completely branded in-app experiences like Amazon Mayday. You click on the button in the app, on your tablet, your Fire tablet, you have a video call with a customer service agent. And you've got the polar opposite, which is actually brands riding on the social networks, experiences. You can actually now book a flight ticket inside Facebook Messenger. And also on top of this now, what I call invisible apps, Siri, Alexa, all those voice apps being created. And the problem with all of this is, as a consumer, actually as a customer, I have a single relationship from my perspective with a brand. I don't need to know the names of all the people involved here and whoever is behind all those messages. I want to have a single relationship over time. And one of the key, thrust, behind what we do at Nexmo here is the fact that one of our core beliefs is that the thread is the key. And actually having that thread, having that conversation in the cloud enables you to make it accessible to all your different systems. You can initiate communication, whether it's messaging or voice, store the context to initiate further communications in context, but also to do things like simply, analytics, to actually make sense of it. And one of the key advices as well is how do you make sure that all of this is stored in a way that is compliant, with the regulation. So now if we look at, sort of the three, I would say three major themes here we see on really how to, I would say, level up, customer engagement. Number one is context. I mean, yeah, that's still the case today. Most customer contact isn't contextual. But the problem is it's actually a big deal. It has got a major impact on how your customers will interact with you and maybe do further business with you. And there are really three sources, I think, of customer context. There's like physical context, like a location from your watch, your phone. The intent, and it's really difficult to actually elicit this, maybe through what you say or what you actually write, in your messages. But also social, what is your profile, what is actually in your newsfeed. And the problem is that, every time you go through communication, there's what's called a contextual creation loop. So both parties have, or at least one of them, has to establish the identity, maybe explain the problem, and then go through a discussion to resolve the problem. And you go through those context creation loop all the time. You go back to the call center, or you go into a chat session, with a customer service agent, for instance. And the thing is, I mean, in theory, contextual communication, should be like a conversation, like between two human beings, where both parties share their context and they all remember. We don't have to go through that loop all over again. It should flow naturally, but it doesn't. And what's very difficult, actually, is on top of this, there are new types of devices that you might wonder, actually, can I share all the context in there? I mean, it's pretty difficult to fit stuff inside a smartwatch. So sometimes the consumers want to actually go into new devices, but you're not actually really able to fit things properly. And on top of this, new developments around regulation. Can you really share all the context? If maybe it's going to, as a brand, you might be breaching privacy, for instance. So that's why actually the whole thread, is very key. So you can actually keep control, and do things, differently, potentially per device, And when you get programmatic access to the context, it's malleable. You can do what you want with it. The second thing is on the omni-channel. I mean, there's an explosion in number of channels. Every month, there's a new type of device, new type of app, new type of a user interface. Mobile is very key, obviously, but in effect, the journeys are pretty much all the time omni-channel. It's never really completely only on the mobile. You are crossing, always experiencing things, in the real world and on a device, and over time, obviously. And the thing is, those channels, they are just a mean to an end. And on top of this, there's been, I think, a lot of attempts to actually pull in customers and recreate social graphs, and basically pulling them in. But the problem is that tends to sort of forcing them to come into you. What seems, I'm thinking now, to work much better is to leverage or actually ride on existing networks, like the social networks. I think a really good example is what WeChat has done in China, where it's more than a chat app. It's actually now a fully fledged ecosystem where you've got, you can buy your cinema ticket, you can buy your movie, do your banking, get a loan, all within WeChat. And you can see actually the same is happening with Facebook Messenger and the other social chat apps, where they're becoming ecosystem of their own. So actually, how do you deal with that? And even the bots actually potentially becoming taking on a personality and being part of your social graph. They actually become one of your contacts. So, but the whole problem here, if you just do this, bit by bit, it just makes it harder. So you basically generate more and more context, with your interaction with consumers, but it's not going to move across. It's actually going to increase the complexity in your experience. Actually, here's an actual example with my dentist. They keep on sending me SMSs, and every time I actually have to work out. So if I say yes, they want me to reply to the text. If I say no, I have to call a number. But it's actually a different number than the number they send the SMS from. And that's just for a silly, yes or no to confirm an appointment. I have to actually work out, 3 different pieces of identities and about two channels. And when it's really well done, here was a simple example, you can build, with our APIs, blending messaging and voice together. You can do very simple flows where, you could send an SMS with a voucher, redeeming a coupon. If the user's got a problem, take them to an IVR, but they're already authenticated, you already know who they are, really directly from the SMS, basically calling back the number, having a very simple interactive experience, through voice, and enabling them afterwards to go back and redeem the coupon. That's kind of a very simple, experience across, identities, across channels, And also, I would say one of the key things that I also see very often brands not doing is consistency. Actually, you can see in a previous example here, in my dentist, so actually they have some kind of a booking appointment management system, but it's not always there, so they don't actually always surface it. So I don't actually understand why it's like this. Yeah? So again, this is the same idea around how you deal with omnichannel is this idea of having that thread in the cloud that enables you to store interaction history, and all the context, like maybe the recordings, the phone calls, but also initiate transactions, all from the same place. And last but not least, I think a major theme, to really upgrade, customer engagement is around what we call human plus. Yeah? So not just artificial intelligence, but I would say looking at artificial intelligence as a way of augmenting interactions between humans. So typically, it's very useful for a lot of different use cases, whether it's prediction, perception, notification, or suggesting things. But the challenge you have is you need brand new skill sets around data science. Even if you use some of the higher level platforms, like Microsoft or Google, etc., it also brings new challenges around data integrity. I mean, you do need to feed data into the systems. If your own data around the context is actually not in good order, I mean, you're not going to be able to make use of it. Secondly, it also requires continuous investments. A lot of these models, need to be retrained. Maybe you've launched a new product, or you've added a new channel, and the way maybe your customers actually message to you in let's say your chatbot, maybe they're going to start actually asking different kind of questions, and you might have to retrain some of your models. There's also brand new usability questions there. And even, I would say, deeper, authenticity question. There was a lot of studies around the fact that if some of those bots, potentially powered by the AI, try to pretend to be too human, actually, they sound creepy to humans, and they actually don't like them. And really, in a sense here, it's one of what we've seen with our customers is very fast moving to what's called a multi-vendor strategy. You probably can't put all your baskets into one egg. But on top of this, what's going to happen, I think, is right now it's really Microsoft, Google, Amazon sort of dominating the space, but there's an emergence of actually specialists with domain knowledge. So not just any kind of voice recognition, but maybe voice recognition targeted for things like business meetings, for instance. What we're actually doing at Nexmo is we've enabled to bridging the gap between the PST and the telephony networks and the AI world. So you can, for instance, have a conference call, participants dialing in through telephony, and have all the audio of that call fed through what's called a WebSocket into an artificial intelligence engine. So you could do things like sentiment analysis, for instance, or maybe even translation or real-time transcription, and potentially feed back into the call. Maybe the agent here could actually even participate and offer suggestions. So actually what we're going to do now is we'll show a quick demo where we've actually integrated or coupled together with our APIs Facebook Messenger, a CRM system called InContact. And also, you will see afterwards, we will couple this with an artificial intelligence service called VoiceBase for sentiment analysis. So what we'll do is actually, initially it starts on chat. So there's the employee in the CRM, the consumer in Facebook Messenger, they chat with each other, and then the consumer is asking for upgrading, escalating to a call. And from there on, we're able to actually do the sentiment analysis. So, yeah, I'll let you take over.
In this demo, we have created a fictitious Facebook page for a brand called Acme Cell. The page will be powered by a simple chatbot. Now, since I'm already logged into Facebook, I don't have to authenticate with the brand. I can start chatting about my account with the bot right away, assuming that my Facebook profile can be matched against what AcmeCell has for me on their end. So let's get started. As you can see, the bot already knows my name and is suggesting a few options. Let's check my balance. It looks like I have a payment due on the 30th. I have an issue with my phone, so I'm going to request a chat with a live agent to get that sorted out. In this case, the chatbot passes control of the conversation to an in-contact agent with a chat skill. Let's follow the conversation to see where it leads.
And in effect, here you get the best of both worlds. You ride on a social network, so they don't have to install an app for the consumer side, but you still reuse your CRM system. This is still all your workflows, your processes.
As the customer, I can decide when I'm ready for a callback from an agent.
So sharing the context with the data that they have on the customer, just to make sure they're calling them on the right number. So here in the case, actually, they want another number for some other reason. I don't know, maybe they're in the office or something like this.
Let me illustrate what's happening behind the scenes before continuing with the call.
So so what we're actually doing here is we're connecting with Nexmo.
On the left side of the screen, we have the sentiment.
The call, so that there's the agent on the CRM side connecting that call with the phone of the consumer. So we've done the connection with the chat. We're connecting, one leg of the call here, the other leg here, and we're actually creating a third leg. The one in the middle here to this thing called VoiceBase is actually a vendor who does transcription, real-time transcription. It's in effect listening. That's what we'll show in a second in the next section.
On the left side of the screen, we have the sentiment graph. And on the right side, we can see the keywords populating. Below the two is the actual transcription as I'm speaking. Notice the sentiment graph is neutral. But if I start saying positive things like, "This service is great. My phone works just fine after the update. Thank you for helping me. I'm very happy now. I really appreciate it," the sentiment goes up. On the other hand, if I start saying things like, "This service is very bad. It's terrible service. I'm very upset and disappointed," the sentiment goes down. With this data, a supervisor can decide if a barge-in or coaching of an agent is necessary to remedy low sentiment calls. And agents who maintain high levels of call sentiment can be rewarded.
Yeah, so I mean, just to recap here, what we've actually done in the last part is we're actually connecting the two legs of the phone call through what's called a WebSocket into the third part and doing the real-time, transcription and kind of analysis of the call. What's amazing here is that you've not had to rewire your business processes. It's still using a CRM. You've not had to actually fundamentally change, consumer habits. I mean, they're using their phone. They're using Facebook. It's their stuff. Every day they use it. But you've actually enabled, actually quite a deep real-time generation of context and analysis and potentially taking action in real time without disrupting consumer habits and business processes. and all through the power of APIs. So, in summary here, three key themes, to upgrade customer engagement. Number one, the context. It's all about storing the context in a single thread in one place, accessible through APIs. Number two, channels. They're exploding. So it's about orchestrating experiences across channels and identities. And thirdly, it is possible to make smart use of artificial intelligence services if you make use of APIs to integrate all the moving parts of your business processes and your customer experiences. That's it. So I think we'll now move to the panel. Thank you, guys. Hey, do you want the clicker? You don't need it. OK.
I'm always blown away when I see what you can do with API and how you can integrate it into real-time communication. So I think there's a lot to come, but we have also great panelists here now, which can also share a little bit more about how they use APIs, how they use contextual communication, and what their thoughts about this is. So I will introduce, first. Ask Elias to introduce yourself first.
Sure. My name is Elias Völker. I'm the founder of Minute Hero. We are an early-stage startup from Hamburg. What we have as a mission is to make meetings and teams more productive. And we do that with our first product, which is a virtual assistant that automatically creates meeting minutes. So what we do is we work a lot with natural language processing, with voice recognition, some of the stuff that we saw on the voice-based demo. That's exactly our field of expertise.
Great, thank you. Piers, can you introduce yourself?
Yeah, my name is Piers Buckley from Babelforce, and what we do is allow the automation of all of these processes that Thomas just described through the APIs, so that you can do what Thomas showed, but without even doing any development. So you can just configure all of those processes. We're a Berlin-based company, and we're on the market for 4 years now already.
Okay. So the first question goes to you, Piers. So how do you see your customers and the market addressing context across multiple channels?
So the context thing is key for us because we saw in this demo at least 3 systems integrated, actually 4 systems integrated. And typically, there's at least 4. So actually, when you look at the number of systems deployed in a customer service or sales approach, it's often 12 plus in total across everything, including the existing CRM and so on. And all of this information has to come together, especially if you think of complex processes in companies with hundreds of employees or thousands of employees serving lots of consumers. This data must be available. And we have the big theme for us is also this single thread that Thomas mentioned earlier on. So what we try to do is make that data available to the customers' processes so that they can actually just test if something is the case at any time, or apply artificial intelligence or automation. I mean, the key is to be able to do almost anything with the data. I mean, the great news is with using APIs as the underlying layer, that, I mean, I've been in the call center sort of sales force enablement business for 16 years, and what you can do now with this kind of approach, without even software projects, just pure configuration, is something that you can do very cheaply and very, very cost effectively, but you can do stuff that you couldn't even dream about doing 10 years ago or even 7 years ago. But the key thing is actually being able to get that context and keep it, and then being able to do whatever you like with it, really.
Thanks, Piers. So Elias, how do you see AI working in conjunction with contextual communication, and what are the opportunities you see?
So I think there's 2 things that you need to take into consideration. One thing is, as I said, AI, what can we do with AI? And then the whole context thing. I mean, we are in business team communications, but it's the same thing as with customer engagement, whether you involve your team or whether you involve customers. It's communications across many different channels, across Slack, email, Trello, physical meetings, all that. So the problem is basically the same with multiple systems being involved. And where AI can help is at the stage where it is today, is basically using, for example, natural language processing to do the things like sentiment analysis, how do people feel, which is very important in customer communications, but also identify what's called entities, so topics, and track those across the different channels, and then bind them together through APIs that tie things together, and tracking these entities, these issues, across, from a physical meeting to an email thread to a chat communication that's been going on Slack.
Great. Piers, what are the challenges of selecting and integrating AI solutions and vendors into omnichannel experience?
So I guess if we're looking at AI in omnichannel or in customer service, then we need to differentiate between kind of doing something in the background on the data that's there and preparing classifications of things, or saying this kind of conversation that happened last week, it looks like it's a sales conversation about an upgrade, and it looks like the person was happy or not. That's happened last week, so we could talk about that historical. And the other way is right now, real time. And we're mainly concerned with real time. And in that case, I think it's very important to look at, well, you can't apply AI effectively and to give a sort of quick business benefit to every single area. So you have to pick use cases where there's a real business impact, where the data is readily available, because you need to have the training data. So you have to be able to actually use those bits of the single thread of context in real time, and also be able to collect it over time to do the training part of what's going on. So in some instances, like with chat, it lends itself very, very easily to that. So does selecting the next 3 answers that the agent could supply, or the salesperson could supply, or the quick finding of the right knowledge-based information. So I think it's usually in the high 80% of both salespeople and agents in customer service responding to surveys saying they don't have the information available. Right? You think of all the information that's needed across those 12+ systems in order to just tell the customer the right thing they should do, why their hotspot is not working in the demo we just saw there. It's actually a lot of stuff that the agent has to have available. And AI plus automation rules around it can actually supply that kind of information, but not even without the agent even pressing a button or searching, just right there, ready for them to use. I think this plus the analysis of the chat and email threads is where I see quite a big impact, and where there's a lot of business benefit as well for our customers.
Okay. Elias, based on the lessons you've learned from adding new channels, what advice could you give to the audience?
Well, one piece of good news is that all these services that are available, like the API libraries, like tools like Zapier and others, what they really allow you, that even as a small startup like we are, they allow you to somehow punch above your weight. You can do things that 5-10 years ago, like only major corporations were able to do. So that's the good news. The challenge that everyone faces, and we are facing this basically on a daily basis, is do you go in the direction of we have a best of breed service for something that does an awesome job on one thing, but one thing only, or do you go into a more generalist direction where you say, okay, I have one service, it might not be perfect for everything, but it covers a lot. And on the one hand, if you go for best of breed, you have the whole integration bit to take care of. And yes, APIs help, tools like Zapier help, but still, you need to integrate this across multiple tools. And the answer is not always the same. It depends on how crucial is this to the value creation of your company to do this. But the trade-off is always there.
All right. So my next question is a very interesting one, considering that we're in Germany at the moment. And so it's really, how do you see issues such as privacy and data protection affecting contextual communication? So I open this up to all of you.
I think it's a real challenge, and no one has really, I think, really cracked it. I mean, first, the privacy regulation is changing really fast, in Europe and in the US. And on top of this, you have to make use of all this data, to really, in effect, have more effective, insights onto your own customers. But you might be challenged with actually, do you actually have to peek into the messages or not? How do you actually, ring fence, what you're going to be using for training, creating the classification in your data? but without, actually creating problems, And also, what about, new changes, new types of messages or calls? How do you actually deal with this? I think that's one of the big challenges. Yeah.
Elias, what do you think about, we just talked today about that, I like to use your service, but without notifying anyone, which is an absolutely no-go, clear.
Yeah.
So how do you deal with that data privacy there?
Well, I mean, the whole privacy data protection thing is, I mean, obviously in the consumer space is a huge issue. Like, it's great if your customer expects you to interact with them on every channel, but you might just not be allowed legally to do it. Like, the customer expects you to send you an email, but if he never opted in, you're, at least in Germany, not legally allowed to sell him an email, even if he asks you to. So how do you deal with that? Same thing is, are we allowed to call you? Things, all these kind of things. So that's in the consumer space. In the business space, I think it's less about the whole data, like personal data protection. It's more about, safeguarding company secret. Like what we do, we deal a lot with what people discuss in meetings. And in order to make our systems better, we need to use this data to train our systems, to train our voice recognition and so on. But then if we train it on customers' data, we are basically listening to their trade secrets. Is that okay? And that's something we need to figure out. And I think that's a general challenge in AI. Yes, you have all this data, but are you allowed to use it? And how do you use it? And how do you also tell your customer how you're using what you're doing with it?
One of the things that we started doing is really enabling our customers to decide pretty much per request, what they want to do with the data, actually apply a policy, at a request level, so that they have really granular control. Because in effect, no one can predict where the regulation will go. So what you want is the flexibility.
Yeah, I would agree. I think that you have to have the ability to change it at any time. I mean, 12 months' time, we'll have the next data regulation change, and even per territory, things are changing. So a lot of our customers are in financial services, and there we usually take the approach where this context data is data that we don't need to keep. So we say, you can keep that data and you can ring fence that, and we only use it in real time plus a certain amount of data that might be needed for analysis or for training. That's kind of a ring fenced set of data in the beginning, and then the other data is used in real time. And that's a reasonable trade-off for particular financial service applications, but it's different in every case and it's changing all the time. So I think you have to allow for finding the right kind of trade-off. And certainly I think there's going to be a lot of activity in this kind of space. Right?
Yeah. So my last question to you all. So what are the design trade-offs that customers need to make across design and usability versus privacy, security, and multi-channel?
Well, I think the design trade-offs are very much, do you want to have, kind of a very universal approach, and maybe having to offer like so many options or different channels, or, you want something which is like very much curated, and let's say you've decided, that engaging with customers on Facebook Messenger is actually very important because that's where your customers are. And so you can actually, I would say dig deep onto this, and make sure that maybe what you have behind there is very specific to the kind of problem that they have. Or you just try to maybe focus on having the wealth of options because maybe you have a very diverse customer base. And you're not going to do as good a job. And I think we still all face a problem, but with the emergence of APIs, it's much easier to test things, to try things. That's a big difference. You're not committed yourself to a 6-month project. You try. Oh no, it's not for me. Okay, I move on. Yeah, but you can still use the same platform.
Okay. Any comments for you?
Obviously, with multiple channels and things changing all the time, it's only a year ago you had to have Messenger and WhatsApp, and now you have to have Line, and you still have to support all the other channels and everything's going on. So I think you're making trade-offs every hour. Right. So the person creating these processes across all those channels is essentially, maybe hour is exaggerated, but certainly every day, every week, which means that I think speed to change is key in the technical design, if we're talking about the technical design for a moment and not the UI or usability part. So if you imagine the increased use of the APIs, like it took Babelforce, an expert in API integration, 1.5 years to integrate our own billing system, right? So if you think about 12 systems across all of those services live and changing them every week, then you've got to have the ability not to just start some huge IT software project for every single one of those changes. And then you've got the ability to make trade-offs. Then I think on top of that, you need the tools then to actually do some real, you can test everything. So you can do some A/B testing, right? You can do the kind of, you can say, I'll try this out on a random sample of whatever percentage of that particular segment, and then it's either going to work or not, which means that you can actually do a great deal more in terms of usability work as well, a lot more flexibly than before. I think those two things are key, this change plus the ability to test.
Sure. So I think from a customer perspective, the customer certainly does face a big trade-off between, let's say, data hygiene in terms of what data do I want to provide to a service provider, a company, and being able to be serviced across channels, across contexts. Because, I mean, obviously, if somebody comments on a post on LinkedIn, do I know this person? Can I interact as a customer with them, or is this a channel that's okay for me to use? And they might expect that, but then that means I have to somewhere store also the information that what this person's LinkedIn profile is. Do I actually need this? I think that's the trade-off the customers face, and I think what Piers said on the trade-offs that we as companies face in building products is really, you know, how much can you do, how much do you want to do, and how well do you want to do it? Because it's very easy to try things quickly, and it's good, but there's also the challenge of there's a difference between doing things quickly and doing things well. And sometimes these two do not go together. And there's tools that make it easier, but it's still not easy.
Yeah. Thank you very much for the insights you all shared. I guess it was very interesting. So just a question to the audience here. Is anyone has a question what relates to the topic here? If not, then thank you very much. Thank you very much for participating here, and yeah, have a great day.
Thank you.
Thanks.